Welcome back to Millers in Motion. As you know, we have made our way up to Elkhart to get a little TLC done to our Valor. And while we're here, we always like to come visit with some of our partners like Alliance and one of our favorites, MorRyde. So one of the biggest questions that we've gotten in doing some of our independent suspension videos and podcasts has been talking about the maintenance of those systems. So instead of just continuously answering those questions in the comments, we figured we would just come directly to the source, corner some guys, and let's talk a little bit about independent suspension maintenance as well as a few other components that you should be maintaining on your coach if you have MorRyde systems. All right, well, we've made it back into the showroom here at MorRyde, otherwise known as my happy place because they allow us to tow our rig much, much smoother. This is Hayden. Hayden was in our first video way back when we installed everything, and one of the biggest questions we got was, these are great, we've owned them now, other people have bought into it, but how in the hell do we maintain these things? Yeah. So if you don't mind, I'd love to kind of go into kind of when you should do things, how and what you have to do to maintain them, whether they do it personally or they bring it back to you guys to do.
Sure. Yeah, so some things can be done yourself, some things you do want to go to a shop or to us to have done. We'll start with some of the more important things, the things that we have set on an actual interval, one being the wheel bearings. So the wheel bearings themselves are on the same interval that they would be on a standard axle with leaf springs. So it's 12,000 miles or 12 months. So annually for most folks, you might be the exception, over 12,000 a year.
And I would say that's full-timers. If you're a full-timer and you move quite a bit, you're probably going to land on the mileage portion of that. Yep. But if you don't land on the mileage portion of it, just know about every 12 months you should probably do this.
Yep. So hand pack the bearings. These do not have the Easy Lube Zerk on them. You do want to pull them apart. In doing that, you do get a little bit of security or insurance. We'll say you can actually inspect your spindles, inspect the bearings themselves, make sure you don't have any heat marks going on. No rollers are going bad.
Right. We actually did a video back when we had our previous coach where we did this. And I said in that video, and I'll say in this video, I actually didn't like using the Easy Lube system that Dexter uses on the axles, because if you don't do it perfectly right and turn the wheel and do all those things, you could actually blow out that back seal, and now you just squirted grease all over your rotors, your brakes, everything. Yep. And so we always dismounted and pulled everything apart versus using that. Now, if you're in an absolute pinch, it's not the worst thing in the world. Just know that there's a very specific way you should do that. But with this, it's no different, for at least for us, than what we normally did.
Yep, and that's exactly right. Blowing the seal at the back is a major concern with that. The other is to grease the torque bracket. So on the bottom of this torque bracket, every single one of these has a greaser sticking straight down towards the ground. So you get underneath there and look straight up at it. It's right here. Oh. You'll find it. So you're going to hit that with a grease gun, same interval, so 12,000 miles or 12 months, until grease comes out the ends of the tube. Now, don't be alarmed. You may get water come out. And that's all you're doing. You're just keeping it watertight. If you're driving in rain, you can get water in there, and that's all we're doing is keeping it tight.
Gotcha.
The other, which is not on a set schedule, would be an alignment. So the alignment does have to be performed by a shop unless you have your own alignment machine, which probably do not. But that's kind of based on tire wear. So every time you get done moving for the day, do a walk around, look at the inside, the outside of the tires, make sure you're not getting any abnormal wear patterns. That's the indicator. You won't feel it pulling, like your car. So you want to actually look at the tires. Yeah,
and coming from our size rig, which is the Valor 44 V14, 46 feet long, barely fits in some of your bays here, as we learned the fun way. Yeah. We've noticed over some time that we are starting to see a little bit of wear to one side. Now, we're coming up on somewhere around the 8,000, 8,500 miles on our independent suspension, so we are getting to that point where it needs to start getting some love, kind of a thing. Yeah. And we are noticing a little bit of wear to our inside tires, again, over 8,000 miles, and we're talking very nominally wear. But because of that, when we scheduled our service with you guys, it's not just this normal thing. We actually want to have an alignment done as well. Yeah. And that brings up sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, that brings up another good point is, if you don't want to do any of this stuff, you can schedule a service appointment with you guys.
Yep, and that's what a lot of people will do. They'll have us do everything. So general inspection, bearing pack, and alignment. Right. That's very common.
I am a firm believer in just bring it back to the guys that did it, because y'all are the best at it. And I know that there's something a little off. They're more likely to catch it than I am, because this is what they do. Like, they're the service guys that are out there, the guys that you manage. Yep. They're trained to look for certain things. And I might not notice a little crack in a bearing that they're like, oh, good God. And that could have caused a big problem 1,000 miles down the road. Right. And they caught it prior to that. Just keep in mind, if you do want to schedule a service appointment here, y'all, it's not just show up and magic things can happen. You do have to schedule it. If you try to do that around a rally season kind of a thing, like if you're coming to the Alliance National Rally, any of the other manufacturers' rallies, you probably want to schedule that pretty far in advance just to ensure you get a time slot.
Correct. Yep.
Anything else on the independent suspension that people should absolutely know about?
Yes. So for the maintenance items, if you're not going to do these yourself, one, the alignment you can't do yourself, but the bearing pack and the torque bracket, I would recommend taking it to a semi-truck shop.
Okay.
Don't go to an RV shop. They don't know a lot about suspensions, especially something like this.
Right.
The alignments, if you do want to get that done elsewhere, it does not have to be done here. Semi-truck alignment shops can do that. We do have a list on our website that lists out quite a few of them over the states that you could choose from.
Very cool. So you couldn't just take it to like a discount tire and let them do an alignment, or whoever, like a small shop, because they're not going to have the proper equipment because, well, space, and then I know you guys have to use a pretty big mechanism that kind of hangs off the pin to actually measure it, and most places aren't equipped to do that if you're just doing a regular vehicle.
Correct. Yep.
Very cool. So in addition to this, if you did the disc brake upgrade, let's talk a little bit about that if you don't mind, but we're going to shift to it.
Yeah.
All right, so if you upgraded your IS here, more than likely, at least to the tune of plus 80% of you guys, probably put disc brakes on, which as much as I love IS, I probably love the disc brakes as not much, if not more, just because of the stopping power and the safety that it gives us. But just like anything else, it's a part, there's wear and tear into it, and you need to maintain it. So what should people be looking for to do on disc brakes?
Yep, so disc brakes are something that you'll see on a vehicle as well. So it's nothing just out of the world you've never seen before. You obviously want to look at your rotor face, make sure you don't have any gouges in it. You can also inspect the pads from the side and kind of see where you're at wear life-wise. So you don't want to be running on metal on metal. That will obviously indicate on this, and gouges are the other big thing to look at.
Can your alignment mess with this any, or is it pretty much true and standard? Alignment's really going to affect your tire, right?
Correct. The alignment will not affect anything with the hub. And
then obviously this is on a very similar assembly we're just looking at, so this would be where you would grease your bearings and all that stuff, so we're not going to talk about that. So it's pretty much like your truck at that point.
Yeah.
It's really just that same maintenance as visually making sure everything looks good and that the wear and tear is correct. And if you are getting a lot of squeaking and those types of things, something probably needs to change, or you need new pads. Is there anything people should just be massively aware of and look out for that? Or like signs of it kind of a thing?
Yeah, noise is the biggest thing.
Yeah.
For sure, yeah. If you don't know what you're looking at, just listen for noise. So they do have wear indicators in there, so as they're getting lower, they will get really loud.
Gotcha.
And to let you know that they're getting down in wear.
Right. And if you did an early version of the D-Max brakes, just know that if you are getting a lot of squeaking and they're brand new, they did switch out the pads to more of a ceramic coated pad, is my understanding, that resolves that. So you definitely want to reach out to D-Max and get that worked out to resolve that problem if you happen to have it. There's not a lot of them out there, it's my understanding. Correct. Just a handful at the very beginning when you guys moved to D-Max. So Hayden brought up a good point when we were looking at the brake assembly over there versus the independent suspension assembly. So if you don't mind, talk a little bit about your hub here.
Yeah, so this is kind of a common misconception. This clear end cap does say oil bath right on it. It's an oil bath cap. So a lot of people taking it to a shop. Let's say you get your service done at a shop and not us. If a service shop sees that, they'll say, well, that's a wet hub. There's no oil in there. You've got a problem. It's not true. These are grease hubs. Right. The reason that we use these caps is for durability. They have a thicker sidewall, so they're less likely to crack and break over time.
So it's a better product, but it also can confuse shops that aren't used to working on RV independent suspensions. And because there's not so many out there, they could potentially make a mistake that would cost you some money.
Yep, exactly.
Or them some money and you a headache.
Yep.
So very cool, man. Thank you so much for showing us through all that stuff. We are going to bring somebody else in just a second that you may have met earlier in the video to talk a little bit about maintaining a CRE 3000 or an Altrck 4000 in case you happen to have those questions. All right, we've pulled Austin back in. We're going to talk a little bit about the CRE 3000 as well as the Altrck 4000 because the maintenance is going to be exactly the same on that. And Austin, how much maintenance is actually involved with these? My rumor is technically nothing.
So you are correct. There is technically no maintenance with our CRE 3000 or the Altrck 4000. So there are a few different things going on. So both components do use a rubber assembly.
Right.
It's a compressed rubber. CRE technically stands for compressed rubber equalizer. So it's just rubber that's compressed on the inside.
Right.
You can look for extra wear. So if the top piece up here is sitting down on the blue part down below, that means that it's compressing too much.
Gotcha.
As long as it's not sitting and resting on it, that means that it's going to be performing just as fine as it's meant to.
So essentially, you just want to do a visual inspection every so often to make sure it looks normal.
Yes.
Anything out of normal, you should probably reach out to somebody or do a little bit of research and figure out why it's doing what it's doing.
Correct.
Because you could potentially be overloaded. There could be something going on with your springs. There could be a number of things that could be causing that to end that way. It could just be a malfunction with the system, and you might just need to flip out the suspension system as well. Yeah. Now, with the suspension system, because you're using the factory springs 9 times out of 10, unless you guys buy new springs for somebody. But then you guys do typically pair the suspension with a wet bolt system.
Correct.
That's where it gets fun.
Yeah, so there are a bunch of different upgrade opportunities. We call it running gear upgrade. So you can do just the suspension upgrade, which is going to replace your stock equalizer. So if this is your frame hanger, it basically just unbolts in the middle, and you replace the bolts on the bottom side that connect to your leaf spring. You replace it with our CRE or the newer big brother, the Altrck 4000. So you can do that just by itself. Use your standard dry bolts, which are going to be these right here. So plastic bushings, 1/4 inch thick material, dry bolts, no grease fitting. Or, to your point, you can upgrade to bronze bushings over plastic, greasable fitting on the end, and then we use lockable bolts on the back end.
Gotcha.
Lockable nuts on the back end.
So this is also formerly known as their wet bolt kit.
Wet bolt kit, heavy duty shackle kit. There's a number of different names. This is going to give you premium performance. It's going to allow for the leaf springs, the suspension system just to glide over those rough roads. On the inside of our bolt, there's a release hole where the grease, as you grease the end of the fitting, the grease will release on the inside of the bushing, and then basically as you're going over these rough roads, it's going to be able to pivot.
It just keeps it lubricated, hence the wet bolt comment or one of those types of things. So how often do you typically want to make sure that these get grease in them?
We recommend twice a year on average. You know, if you're a full-timer, you're going 50,000 miles, then maybe every few thousand miles or so.
Gotcha.
But for the average RVer, we recommend twice a year.
Okay. And if a rig sits for an extended period of time, you should probably consider looking at it. Like if a rig were to sit for a year, let's say, you should still more than likely just put a little bit extra in there.
Yeah. I mean, our general rule of thumb, there's no such thing as too much grease when it comes to a wet bolt kit. So with a disc brake that Hayden talked about, that whole system, there's a proper amount of grease. You don't want to blow out the seals on the back end, all that. With a wet bolt kit, there's no such thing as too much grease.
Gotcha. And I will say that I've done this to our previous coach quite a bit because it had the CRE 3000 on it.
Yeah.
What I typically like to look for is when you are using a grease gun on the Zerk and it comes out, I typically look for the brighter of the two colors. So if you use like a red lithium grease that has a red tint to it, typically as you're squirting it through, the old grease will seep out and that'll have a more of a black tint to it. And then once you see the bright red, then you know you've gone all the way through it and you've replaced the grease and then you're good to go. You will create a mess. So shop towels will become your friend if you're going to do this. This is definitely one of those things that you can do yourself. I'm sure you guys would be happy to charge people to do it for them.
We'd love to have you.
But I do also feel like this is something that's pretty simple. The only thing you'd really need is a grease gun with a Zerk adapter on the end of it, and lithium number 2 grease, if I remember correctly.
That is correct.
Which you can find literally everywhere.
I think it's called high temp, and there's all the different NLGCI or whatever. There's all these different acronyms. And
I personally like the Lucas. I don't know why. I like red because the red I can see better because sometimes there's blue greases and other things. And since y'all's components are blue, sometimes it makes it hard to see.
That's right.
And so the red on the blue makes it easier to see so I can tell when I'm done doing all that. Now, you still have a wheel assembly. You still have your bearings and all that stuff. So just like Hayden talked about the independent suspension, you should still inspect those and do that with these systems because you're not replacing any of your wheel assemblies or anything with the suspension system like you are with the independent suspension where you are replacing all that stuff. So you can use the Easy Lube systems if you choose to. Again, I'm not the biggest fan of them simply because of what you potentially could do. So that would be the same steps that Hayden talked about as far as taking everything off, inspecting the bearings, cleaning everything, repacking them. That becomes a little more cumbersome. If you're mechanically inclined, you'll probably figure it out. If you're not, I would definitely probably take that into a shop somewhere or you guys or wherever you happen to be to get that done.
Yeah.
I just talked a lot about y'all stuff.
Yeah, we're excited. I mean, it's been a good product for us. Our heavy-duty shackle kit's one of our top-selling products. We say fortunately and unfortunately. Unfortunately, that it's the #1 issue in typical RVs because shackles, plates break. This is what goes on is that hole right here starts to wallow out, gets bigger and bigger until that's one we pulled out of our dumpster. Someone limped here to our factory. We pulled it out of our dumpster just as kind of a, hey, this is what can happen.
Yeah, I will say that this is probably, if you're going to do the suspension, there's really no reason not to do these, because if my understanding is this piece isn't necessarily going to fail, but it's also not helping your rig out any.
Correct.
So this is going to help it out, or the Altrck, but this is the part that always fails.
Yep.
So to me, I would say this is the #1 upgrade in addition to the actual suspension system that I would do. And when you guys work with your OEM partners, your alliances, those types of things, when they put a CRE 3000 on one of the coaches, they automatically come with a wet bolt kit, correct?
So they have the option as well. Most customers that will upgrade to our CRE 3000, like Alliance or some of the other brands out there, they will do the CRE 3000 with the Shackle kit. There are some customers out there, at least there were, I don't know today,
that
they do model changes. Yeah, they'll do the suspension without the wet bolt kit.
Which you will be able to tell very quickly if you have it or not, because it's going to look like that, especially if it's brand new and has to have a bunch of road usage. If it's road used, it might be a little darker and less this color. But if you see that big blue plate with everything else, you more than likely have a wet bolt system, unless somebody just got fancy and painted their non-wet bolts.
Yeah, I don't know. That might have just been for display, but yeah, they'll be silver, they'll be bright, they'll stand out. You should know right away.
Realistically, it's that Zerk fitting on the back. If you reach your hand back there and touch that, and you feel that Zerk fitting, you know you've got a wet bolt. That's the telltale.
One other thing, just to note real quick, it's not a maintenance tip, it's just an FYI. So a lot of manufacturers split the way they install their greasable bolts. A lot of people actually put them facing outward. We don't recommend it, only because it's harder to get a grease gun in there. You'd have to have a 90-degree. A lot of people put them outboard, or inboard. So you can just sneak underneath the tire, connect it, and you're good to go. So they'll either be facing out or in. If you're doing the install aftermarket, you can kind of pick and choose. Yeah,
I would tell you that I would recommend facing in as well, simply because you got to remember your wheel assembly is going to sit right about in here. And so it's depending on how your coach is leveled and angled and all those things, there's a chance that wheel could get pretty tall. And even though most grease guns have a rubbered hose that gets up there, you still have to come in at a reasonable angle. Otherwise, you're going to pinch that line. And then you're just going to be doing a hand workout trying to pump grease in there, because it's not going to go anywhere. So that's a great tip. All right. So again, crime of opportunity time. While we're here, Austin was talking a little bit about other things that require some maintenance. And this is a good point, is if you have the MorRyde rubber pin box like we do, there are some things you do have to check for.
So there, as Ryan mentioned, there are a few things here. So the pin box, what it does, again, it kind of cushions the rough roads as you're going down highways, expansion joints, railroad tracks. It is basically the barrier between the hitch and the RV. So on the inside of here is basically a 12-inch long, 8 or so inch wide rubber block. It's basically what we use on our independent suspension that goes up and down. We take that, flip it on its side, and it moves forward and backward.
Way to be technical, guys.
So we reuse parts whenever we can. So this is basically the same thing in a little bit different format. So the rubber block on the inside lasts on average about 10 years. We recommend just inspecting it every year or two. If you feel like it's chucking, if it's pushing forward and slamming back, that's when it's usually a pretty good indication that something's going on with the rubber spring. So it's maintenance free other than that, but just check on that. There are also what are called glide pads, which are these little white pucks on the bottom side of the pin box. That's going to allow that bottom pad to skid forward and backward. So skid pad, pin box assembly, and then those glide pads are really the three moving parts.
So when the slide pads start to go bad or need to be replaced, what visually does that typically look like?
So there's weather checking or spider webbing. Those are normal processes, because a lot of people will go from humidity to dry weather or hot to cold throughout the year.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Especially people that travel quite a bit. So spider webbing, weather checking, totally normal. If you start to see any big chunks missing from that white puck, that's usually going to be an
realistically just deterioration of some kind.
Yes.
So
if it's falling apart, change it.
Yeah, right. If you are missing it, you should probably get one. If they get discolored, is that potential failure, or is that just the rubber or the material it's made of just discoloring because of temperature, weather, those types of things?
That's exactly right. Yeah, it's UMHW, so it's like a high temp, high density plastic basically. So coloration is fine. Weather checking, spider webbing, those small cracks, totally fine. Because it's meant to basically glide forward and backwards. It's actually taking a lot of the weight of the pin box and the weight of your coach, and it just glides forward and back. So as far as visual indicators, if it's missing parts or if there's chunks coming out, then you can replace it. Again, the pin box, I believe, don't quote me on this, I think it has a 3-year warranty.
Right.
We would replace parts free of charge if anything was within that warranty. And then outside of that, there's a little pad on the front and on the back. So if you have to slam on your brakes, if a deer runs out in front of you, or if someone cuts you off, which happens a lot in RVs, people try to get around you real quick.
Right.
If you slam on your brakes, this does want to move really far forward.
Right.
And so instead of it just being metal on metal, these little pads up front can protect it from being metal on metal.
Essentially just cushion the blow a little bit.
Exactly. Yep. They're little cushion pads. So there's one in the front, one in the back.
Gotcha.
Everything can be changed out in under an hour. So all you do is these little pucks up top. You can pull these out, and then you just access the 4 nuts through the top, pull the 2 front bolts out of the front, 2 out of the back, and the whole bottom skid plate falls off. So you can change out the rubber block, the pads in the front and back, and the white
skid plates.
Yeah. Everything can be changed out. So
very
it's
cool.
as easy as that.
That's good to know, because I didn't know you're supposed to maintain those. Whoops.
So, and it is what we would call maintenance free until you start seeing those things later, years and years and years later.
Gotcha. So that's not common for somebody to have to really do this often or ever, potentially.
Correct.
Gotcha.
Yep. So if you're owning your RV, a lot of people will have 5, 6 RVs in their lifetime. And if every 3 years you change out your RV, you should never have to do anything.
Right.
If it's 15 years later, you have the same RV, you're likely going to have to change out the rubber block and a couple other small components.
But at the end of the day, it's just like anything else on your RV. You should be doing walkarounds. You should be doing visual inspections, whether it be of your roof materials, your seals, these types of things, your suspension systems. It's just one of those things that if something looks abnormal, question it.
Yeah.
And then do your research, and hopefully you find videos either like this or more in-depth ones, or you can reach out to the companies directly, in this case MorRyde, and at least ask the question of what you should be looking for and confirm you're good or not good. And then if you're not good, how do I go about fixing, replacing, whatever needs to happen to get you back up and functioning 100% for safety reasons. All right, well, I had to go a little handheld, get you the full, true vlogging experience here.
Feels good.
Yeah, not weird at all in public, by the way. Thank you so much, man. We really appreciate taking time explaining a lot of this stuff. Big thanks to Hayden, who had to actually go back to real work, because apparently doing this is just fun work.
This is a side job.
But thank you for letting us come hang out. Again, if you guys have any questions or anything, please leave them down in the comments below. If you have a need for independent suspension, do us a favor, and you can email their sales team at sales@morryde.com, and we'll also put a phone number down below if you have some questions. If you let them know, don't talk to them. If you let them know we sent you, we get a little help, and we appreciate it. Okay, back to you. So if you are interested in those systems, make sure and reach out to them. And then there's also a link that if you're looking for any little accessories like the step above stairs, the safety rail, and a bunch of other stuff, you can click on that link, get a little bit of a discount, a little 7% off and some free shipping if you click that link too. Thank you guys so much for watching, and we will see you next week because we're headed back to Texas because I miss my wife. Bye, Mom.